Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S MindLab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some people seem to soak up information like a sponge, while others just let it slide right off? Well, this new theoretical framework might have some fascinating clues. We're diving into a really interesting idea that connects how we deal with our deepest relationships to how we take in information from the world around us. It is like asking, does the way you relate to your mom affect how you take advice from your boss? Sounds a bit wild, right? But stick with me because this research suggests there is a real link. The core idea here is that our personalities, our deep-seated ways of being and relating, shape how we receive and process information. Think about it. If you've had experiences where people were always trying to trick you, you are probably going to be super careful about new information, right? You'll scan it for hidden meanings. On the other hand, if you've always relied on others to tell you what to think, you might just accept things without much question. The researchers noticed that when people come to therapy, even if they seem to have the same problem on the questionnaire about trusting others, they react very differently. They describe two people who both score high on mistrust. One is super suspicious, always looking for a hidden agenda. The other is just withdrawn, quiet, and seems to barely take anything in. This tells us that just knowing someone is mistrustful isn't enough. The kind of mistrust matters. This research builds on something called the Psychodynamic Diagnostic Manual, or PDM-3. It is a way psychologists classify different personality patterns or character organizations. For example, it has categories for paranoid personalities, schizoid personalities, and many others. Now, the PDM-3 also talks about mentalization and how it is linked to epistemic trust. Epistemic trust is basically your belief in the trustworthiness and relevance of information that comes from other people. So, the big question the paper is tackling is this: how do these different PDM-3 character organizations relate to different ways of trusting or mistrusting information? They're proposing that each character type has a unique epistemic attunement. What is epistemic attunement? The paper explains it as a person's characteristic, almost automatic way of receiving and processing information, shaped by their past relationships. It is like a preset tuning fork that vibrates at a certain frequency when information comes in. It happens before we even consciously decide whether to believe something or not. It's how information shows up for us. They say it is not about if you can think, but how your whole personality structure filters what you can think about and how you can think it. It's not a deficit, but a way of operating. To build this idea, they draw on a few different psychological traditions. First, they look at Donald Winnicott, who talked about how we develop our sense of self through relationships. They also talk about Wilfred Bion, who described how raw emotional experiences, which he called beta elements, have to be transformed into something thinkable by what he called alpha function. In early life, this alpha function is helped by a caregiver who can contain the baby's overwhelming feelings and return them in a more manageable way. So, Bion suggests thinking isn't just a private thing, it is a relational achievement. This gives us the idea of epistemic metabolism, how information gets taken in, tolerated emotionally, and integrated. Then there is object relations theory. This theory says we don't just interact with neutral information. We interact with information through the lens of our internalized relationships. When someone tells you something, you are also subconsciously asking, who is this person? What do they want from me? What does accepting this say about me? So, the same factual information can feel very different depending on the object relational world into which it lands. We also bring in Fonagy and Campbell's work on epistemic trust. They suggest we're wired to learn from others, but this relies on us seeing the communicator as trustworthy. If our early experiences don't support this, we might end up being too vigilant, too accepting, or somewhere in between. Their research has even shown that different levels of epistemic trust are linked to different defense mechanisms. Finally, they talk about Jurist's concept of mentalized affectivity. This is about our ability to understand and manage our own emotions with reflective awareness. It is the bridge between raw emotion and thoughtful processing. This framework suggests that for each personality type, there is a specific affective texture that colors how information is received. Now, for the really interesting part, the authors propose a mapping between the 13 PDM-3 character organizations and 13 distinct epistemic attunements. They've laid them out in a table. Let's look at a few examples. For someone with a schizoid organization, information is engaged through impersonal contact rather than warmth. Their affective texture in receiving information is defensive detachment, and warmth can feel intrusive. For a paranoid individual, information is scanned for hidden motive and threat before reception. Their affective texture is vigilance toward shame and projected aggression. For a narcissistic person, information is received based on how it reflects on them and the source's status. It is filtered through their self-esteem, leading to idealization and devaluation. Think about someone with a dependent organization. They probably receive information best when filtered through or confirmed by a trusted other. Their affective texture involves performance anxiety and a need for relational scaffolding to feel safe knowing things. Or consider an anxious avoidant person. They approach information cautiously because it might trigger anxiety. Their affective texture is anticipatory anxiety, and they might prefer not knowing over knowing. And for a somatizing person, emotional and relational information is registered bodily before, or instead of being mentalized, showing alexithymia or affective agnosia. These are hypotheses, not yet proven facts, but they offer a new way to think about why people struggle with information differently. The paper gives two illustrative profiles. Profile describes someone with withdrawal and low engagement who scores high on mistrust. The authors suggest this isn't paranoid mistrust, but a schizoid retreat. The implication for therapy is that approaches relying heavily on warm, in-the-moment exchange might be less effective. Instead, written formulations between session reflective tasks or asynchronous ways of processing information might be more helpful. Profile B involves someone with borderline intellectual functioning who struggles to retain information. While cognitive limits are acknowledged, the framework suggests their difficulties might also stem from a dependent epistemic attunement, needing a trusted other to guide them, and an anxious, avoidant attunement, avoiding questions when uncertain. This implies therapeutic delivery could be improved by scaffolded review with a key worker, normalizing not knowing and checking in about anxiety before testing comprehension. So, what does this all mean for clinical practice? First, it helps with differentiation. Two people with the same score on a general mistrust questionnaire might be experiencing very different underlying issues. This difference matters for how we approach them. Second, it is about calibrating therapeutic delivery. The framework suggests that delivery methods should be adjusted to a person's epistemic attunement. For example, if someone has a schizoid attunement, written materials might be better. If they have a somatizing attunement, engaging bodily and concrete dimensions might be more helpful than immediate symbolic interpretation. Third, it offers a lens for interpreting cognitive assessments. Slowed processing speed in an obsessive-compulsive individual, for instance, might not just be a cognitive deficit, but reflect their need to organize and verify information before acting. The researchers have even developed a self-report questionnaire to measure these epistemic attunements, which will be reported separately once it is psychometrically validated. This is exciting because it means this theory could be tested and used more widely. This paper proposes a vital new way to understand how our character, our deep relational patterns, influence how we engage with and make sense of the world. It suggests that understanding how to communicate therapeutically is inseparable from understanding how a person's character is organized. It's a call to look beyond surface-level information processing and consider the whole person's relational history. What do I think? I find this framework incredibly promising. The way it integrates different areas of psychology like object relations, mentalization, and diagnostic manuals to create a cohesive picture of how we receive information is brilliant. It moves beyond the one-size-fits all approach to understanding people and highlights the importance of individual experience. One of its strengths is its descriptive, non-pathologizing approach. It's not about saying someone is wrong to process information in a certain way, but about understanding how they do it and what that means. The connection between internal world and external reception of information is so intuitively true. And this paper gives it a solid theoretical grounding. Of course, as the authors note, this is a theoretical framework, and empirical validation, especially using their new instrument, will be crucial. We need to see how these proposed attunements play out in real research. Also, while they've mapped all 13 PDM-3 organizations, real people are complex and often exhibit traits from multiple organizations. So, clinical application will likely involve identifying the dominant attunement. The implications for therapy and education are huge. Imagine tailoring how you teach or how you offer support based on someone's epistemic attunement. It could make learning and healing so much more effective. Future research could explore how these attunements change over the course of therapy or how they might be influenced by different cultural contexts. All in all, this is a super thought-provoking piece of work that bridges complex psychological theories with practical clinical observation. It reminds us that how we know what we know is deeply tied to who we are and who we've been with. What do you think about this idea of epistemic attunement? Does it make sense to you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S MindLab for more science decoded, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.